Welcome to the next part of Questions of Life. We're looking at the whole subject of fear.
And I think the really key thing that you said is the starting point of not expecting to have a life that is without fear. That fear is part of being human. It's part of how God created us. And there's a healthiness to that. And I think sometimes we think we want a life without fear, that we think that's the pinnacle, particularly in the whole area of faith. That actually, surely I should just be able to have a life where I'm at peace and I'm calm and everything is all right. But you look at Jesus, there were times in his life where he most certainly was not at peace. The Garden of Gethsemane, crying out with such pain and depth, take this from me, but if it is your will, I will do it. That wasn't I'm at peace, this is great, I'm going to be crucified tomorrow, let's go for it. That was raw fear and emotion. And so I think somehow we might have to just change our mindset that says fear is part of how God created the human race. There are real positives to it. And then to take it to the next step, which is what you're saying, and to try and think, actually, I'm probably not going to eliminate this fear in most situations. How am I going to cope with that? And then having the courage to trust in God and with him walk into that situation. So how do you do that? Is that a sense of you spend time praying? Are there verses in the Bible that you go to? What do you do in that kind of situation?
I think definitely praying is a huge thing. Is voicing and articulating to God and asking for his guidance, asking for his strength, asking him to give us courage. Mm-hmm. I think that's really important, just asking for courage. I mean, again and again, Jesus says, do not be afraid. And I've heard it said that that's because they were wrong to be afraid. I think that's rubbish. He says, do not be afraid because he feels the compassion that they are experiencing fear. And he wants them to know he's with them. Yeah. And in that particular situation, he's going to take away the fear. Mm-hmm. So I think that most of the time, I do not lose fear until I've done it. Mm-hmm. Most of the time, I think Jesus says, do not be afraid, not because he wants me to suddenly feel at peace before I do the thing that's difficult, but he's just saying, it's okay, go for it. You'll be okay. You'll be all right, do it. Yeah. And then when I've done it, the fear is gone. Yeah. And I think that's my main principle, is that if I'm convinced that God wants me to do this, I'm going to do it. And I believe in faith it's going to be okay, but I don't necessarily believe it's going to be easy. Yeah. And I think that's where the faith comes in, that faith is stronger than fear. So faith is an action, not a feeling. And faith is the decision to trust God that this is going to be okay. But I don't think I've ever felt peace before. So these live streams are a great example. I never feel comfortable with 1 minute to go. I feel anxious. Yeah. I feel afraid. I feel afraid of what I might say. Feel afraid of how it's going to come across. But I don't let the fear stop me doing live streams. I'm frightened every Sunday when I do something in church. I never sleep well on a Saturday night. I have never, ever gone to sleep on a Saturday night and slept well and woken up refreshed and ready for Sunday. I am always afraid. Yeah. But I've come to believe that is okay. That's the way it needs to be, partly because it makes me more sharp, and partly because Jesus says, I want you to do what's difficult. And if it was easy, I wouldn't be afraid. But he's asking me to do things that are difficult. So how do we cope? We pray. I find loads and loads of scriptures that are comforting and give strength. I need to be sure that I'm doing the right thing. And that's important. Yeah. And a lot of my fears are around whether I'm doing the right thing. And sometimes you've got to just go with it. Sometimes you've got to hold back. Sometimes you've got to wait. It's tricky to know whether you're doing the right thing. And that's my biggest fear, that I'm doing the wrong thing, that I'm letting somebody down by doing what's wrong. But I've come to accept that it's the deal. It's part of following Jesus. He talks about taking up our cross. And if that's my cross, I'll put up with waking up every Sunday morning at 6:30 thinking, why am I going to do this? And I've done that for 30 years.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose for me, I feel a little bit the same. I do speaking sometimes on a Sunday, and it's no secret I've suffered with panic attacks, with anxiety. Standing in front of people has always been a huge ordeal. And I think there are a few ways that I've begun to cope with that anxiety and that fear. Obviously praying, obviously a sense of, okay, God, if you've given me a gift, I want to use that for you. And one of the things that I began to do was to not look at what could go wrong, but look at why God would want it to go well and why God would want to bless it. And so then to begin to pray, okay, God, bring in the people that you want to speak to on this particular occasion. Open their hearts and their minds and begin to praying into their lives. And God, I want you to do this and to do this, and kind of take the focus off me. And I always used to be fearful that I'm going to faint, I'm going to throw up. And that comes from my childhood. That comes from an incident on holiday in Weston-super-Mare when my brother threw up in the street. And just everybody's reaction of horror and shame that this had happened just did something to my psyche. And it was like, well, you can never be sick. And I was always petrified of being sick. And then I thought, well, what's the worst that can happen? I can throw up on the front row and people will still love me. The service will go on, you'll clear it up, and it will all be okay. And it's about changing my perception of it. And it's about recognizing on Saturday night, I'm not going to sleep because I'm like you, I don't. And I don't wake up on Sunday morning, oh, I've got the best word that I'm going to be sharing with everybody. That doesn't happen. I have this fear. But one of the things that I've noticed is that I've always wanted just that moment before you speak to have a sense of peace. That doesn't happen, but it's when I put one foot in front of the other. And when you get going and when you get into it, it's then that I feel I begin to calm down and we're okay. But I have to take that step of faith. And I have to, in my mind, think, why would God not want this to go well? Why would God not want to use me? Why would God not want to bless me? Whereas before it was always, Cath, you're not good enough. You can't do this. You've got nothing to say. And it's all those little faceted things, working them through with God and saying, okay, God. But it's not easy. And I think of Christians around the world that are killed for their faith, that are persecuted. And what's my challenge? I'm fearful and panicked about standing in front of 350 people. I'd take that any day. And there are times when I really enjoy it and feel really fulfilled, and it's fantastic. But it's that mindset, isn't it? It's that preparation. It's that saying, I'm never going to be in a place where this isn't going to scare me. Let's embrace it. Let's go with it. But let's go with it in God's strength. And I think one of the things that's possibly been unhelpful in my life is the expectation from others when I've been fearful or anxious. I remember I went to talk to someone at Bible college. I went to talk to one of my tutors. And I said, look, I'm struggling with panic attacks, I'm struggling with fear and with anxiety. And she goes, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Here's a psalm, go away and read it and ask God to reveal each of these characters to you and you'll be fine. And there was this sense that if you just read this passage of scripture, you'll be at peace and you'll be okay. And I think that's been one of the unhelpful things that we've seen in Christianity. I don't know whether you've experienced that or seen that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we need to recognize that peace essentially in one area is the freedom from guilt. It's not the freedom from fear, because as I keep saying, fearful things can happen and we shouldn't be blind to them. And faith is moving forward with fear. Great faith is moving forward with great fear. I don't think it's therefore helpful to have an expectation that you can eliminate all kinds of fears and anxieties. And if we talk about our different buckets, if the fear is something that is probably going to happen, then it's ridiculous to eliminate that fear. If the fear is something that's irrational or unlikely to happen, then the way to deal with it is to explore why we're so afraid of it. Not to just think, I shouldn't be feeling this way. And at the end of the day, you could say, if I was a proper Christian, spiders wouldn't frighten me. And if I'd read the Bible and trusted it enough, spiders wouldn't frighten me. But I tend to think it's just part of my humanity. And it's okay to be frightened of spiders, and it doesn't really need healing, it just needs managing. And I think we manage fears rather than try and find a verse to eliminate them all.
I've got a message in here by text from Cath. Is fear the same as anxiety?
I'm not an expert to know enough what we mean. We often talk about what does the writer or the speaker mean. What do people mean by words? I think that we might mean different things by the word fear and anxiety, or we might mean the same thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's difficult to say. I think that in my mind, anxiety is slightly more chronic, long-lasting, and less acute than a fear. So, you may see those two words differently. So I would see anxiety sometimes as something we can't pinpoint what it is. We're just anxious, and it's a vague feeling. Sometimes we're anxious, and what we're really saying is it's not quite become a fear, but we're uncomfortable about it. So those are two different ways in which I might use the word anxiety. For other people, I think the word anxiety is more acute, and if it is more acute, then it's probably what I mean by fear. So when I've been talking about fear, you could quite easily use the word anxiety. If for you, anxiety is debilitating. When I talk about anxiety in my life, I don't mean the things that are stopping me doing things.
Yeah.
Whereas the fears are.
Yeah.
Whereas I think for other people, the word anxiety is the thing that stops you doing something, in which case swap the word fear for anxiety in what I'm saying.
Brilliant. Okay, so we're also saying that it's okay to have fears as a follower of God, as a Christian. There are people throughout the Bible. You think of Moses, when God spoke to him at the burning bush and wanted him to set his people free. He came up with excuse after excuse. No, send someone else. I'm this, I can't do it. It's perfectly normal and natural. But what we see with each of those is what you were saying, that actually they had the courage to then step into that which God was asking. So for Christians, it isn't this is where I'm heading for, this fearless existence.
Yeah.
But we have a God who does meet us in our fears. We have a God who is able to still the waters, to bring peace and give us the courage to face whatever it is that needs facing. And it's sometimes that we need professional and other help within that. Yeah. And that the church isn't always somewhere that is an expert and can provide that.
Yeah. If I've broken my leg, I need an x-ray. If I've needed surgery, I need a surgeon. If there are parts of my mind that are stuck somewhere, I will probably need someone who's a bit more experienced and skilled to help me unravel that sticking point.
Okay, I've got another message in here from Amy. I'm currently getting over something that happened in my life which was traumatic at the time. It was something that involved another family. I no longer go to anything that involves this family. However, I do still come into contact with them occasionally because they live very close to our home. I can recognise that this is a healthy response to being around people who were part of a very difficult situation and difficult time in my life. I can see it's my body's way of protecting me. However, I keep feeling God would want me to move past this fear and to be able to be friendly and smile to this family if I see them. But I just can't do it and find myself running in the other direction, feeling quite unwell. Do you think I need to keep moving past this feeling, or do I just try to be kind to myself and give myself more time?
I would be kind to yourself, give yourself more time, because God has given us the healing process of time.
Yeah.
And there is a grieving process that needs to be go through with all kinds of traumas. And it can't be rushed, it can't be avoided, it can't be gone round. And just, we know where we want to be, and we allow ourselves to get there at the pace that God takes us there, and not to run and push ourselves and force ourselves, and not to do things out of guilt or fear that other people are judging us and that we should do this. And take your time, absolutely. That's what I've learned with ladders. Just take my time.
And I think the ideal in that situation isn't to get to a point where you're all chummy and friends again. The ideal is to get to a point in that situation where you continue to be at peace.
Yeah.
And actually, you're at a point that you don't necessarily have to smile at them and say, hello, that's not a bad thing because of what you've been through. But I suppose the key is how you react to that. And that's the thing, to give yourself time and space to process. And I love what she says about seeing God in it and beginning to work these things out. So I'm like you, I think it is just be kind to yourself. That when people hurt us, that takes a fair long while, particularly when it's deep hurt and particularly when it's caused a lot of difficulty and trauma in lots of situations. I think we just got to be kind and not think I've got to be this super person, and being a super Christian means that I forgive everyone and hi, great, how you doing? You know, there's people that I've forgiven that I wouldn't let back in anywhere near my life. And I've genuinely forgiven them, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think that's what God asks of me. I think he asks me to forgive, and he wants to ensure that I'm okay and I'm healed of that hurt, and I get on with my life. So I think that's great. That's really, really good.